The Imperium does not tell you when your world is going to die. There is no announcement, no warning klaxons, no proclamation from Terra that echoes through the Vox networks. The decision is made in a room you will never see, by people whose names you will never know, and it is recorded in documents that use your planet's designation number, not its name. The order passes through channels. Forms are filed, seals are affixed, ships are rerouted, and your world continues. For a time, you wake up, you go to work, you pray to the God Emperor, you eat your ration of reclaimed protein, you look up at the sky and see the same polluted orange you've always seen. Everything is normal. Everything is as it has always been. The Imperium does not kill people quickly. It does not need to. It has built a galaxy where death is simply another form of service, and your service has been calculated, assessed, and determined to be complete. This is what it feels like to live on a world marked for Exterminatus. This is what happens when the Imperium decides you are no longer worth the resources it takes to keep you alive. Before we speak of the dying, we must speak of the living, or rather, of the system that defines what living means. Kessler's world was a mining planet, not a particularly important one, not strategic, not blessed with rare minerals or archaeotech. Just another rock in the segmentum obscurus with promethium deposits deep enough to justify extraction and a population large enough to work the drills. The Administratum had classified it as Grade 7 Tertiary. Moderate output, acceptable compliance. Population 600 million, give or take 50 million. The margins of error on census data for worlds like Kessler's were generous. When you govern a million worlds, precision becomes expensive. Every decade, Kessler's world paid its tithe. The tithe was everything. It was not a tax. It was not a tribute. It was the foundational contract between a planet and the Imperium. You exist because the Imperium allows you to exist. You prove your worthiness through production, through obedience, through the regular and punctual delivery of whatever your world has been designated to provide. For Kessler's world, that meant promethium. 60 million barrels per standard Terran year, delivered to orbital depot stations where Navy cargo haulers would collect it, distribute it, burn it in the engines of ships that fought wars the miners would never hear about. The people of Kessler's world did not ask where the promethium went. They did not ask why the quotas increased every few decades. They did not ask why the Administratum refused requests for new drilling equipment, or why the Vox transmissions to nearby systems went unanswered for months at a time. They drilled, they filled the barrels, they loaded the haulers, they prayed. This was the system. This was the mechanism by which the Imperium survived. A trillion souls laboring in the dark, each one a component in a machine so vast that no single person could comprehend it. The machine did not love them. It did not hate them. It simply used them, the way a drill uses a bit, until the bit wore down and needed to be replaced. And when a world could no longer meet its tithe, the machine made a calculation. Tasvin Vok was 43 years old and had worked in the Administratum sub-offices on Kessler's world for 22 of them. He was not a member of the priesthood. He had no augmetics. He had never left the planet. He had a wife, 2 children, and an apartment in the Mid-Hive district that overlooked the eastern life. His job was to count barrels. Every day he sat in a gray cubicle with a gray data slate and recorded the output from drilling site Phi 7. He noted discrepancies. He filed reports when equipment broke down. He forwarded maintenance requests to the Mechanicus liaison, who usually ignored them. He had done this for 2 decades, and he would do it until he died, and someone else would sit in his chair and do it after him. Tasvin was a faithful man. He believed in the God Emperor. He believed in the Imperium. He believed that his work mattered, even if he could not see how. The Administratum taught that every data entry, every filed form, every recorded number was a prayer in itself, a small act of service that kept the great machine running. He did not think of himself as important. He did not think of himself as special. And he was right. On the morning of 3.467 to an M41, Tasvin arrived at his cubicle and opened his data slate to find an error in the previous month's tithe projection. Drilling site Phi 7 had produced 4.2 million barrels instead of the projected 4.8 million, a shortfall of 600,000 barrels. It was not catastrophic. Equipment failures happened, Veins ran dry, workers got sick. The Administratum built margins into the projections for exactly this reason. Tazven filed the discrepancy report. He flagged it for managerial review. He noted the cause, degraded drillhead efficiency, pending Mechanicus maintenance approval. Then he moved on to the next day's count. He did not know that his report would be the first record in a chain of documents that would eventually condemn his entire world. The Mechanicus liaison for Kessler's world was a junior tech priest named Yothis IX. He had been assigned to the planet 17 years ago and had requested transfer 14 times. All requests had been denied. Yothis IX looked at his backlog. He looked at the 83 other pending maintenance requests. He looked at the projected delivery time for parts, 8 months. He filed the request as low priority and moved on. No one blamed him. This was not negligence. This was not incompetence. This was simply the way the system worked. Resources were finite. Priorities had to be set. Kessler's world was a grade SEP tertiary planet. It did not warrant expedited maintenance. The drill at Site Phi 7 continued to operate at reduced efficiency. The shortfall for the next month was 5.1 million barrels, then 4.9 million, then 4.6 million. Tazven filed the reports. They were reviewed by his supervisor, a woman named Hallex, who had been doing this work for 30 years. She noted the trend. She escalated it to the planetary governor's office, as protocol required. The governor's office received the report and added it to a file. The file was labeled Tithe Variance Analysis. It was one of 40 such files that year. The planetary governor of Kessler's world was a man named Eredin Vass. He was 72 years old and had governed the planet for 19 years. He was not corrupt. He was not incompetent. He was tired. He drank Rakaf in the mornings and Amasek in the evenings and prayed every night before bed, thanking the emperor for another day of service. Governor Vass read the tithe variance report. He saw the numbers. He understood the problem. The promethium veins were running dry. The equipment was aging. The workforce was exhausted. He had 3 options. 1. Request an extension on the tithe deadline. This would require filing a petition with the Administratum Sector Office, which would take months to process and would likely be denied. Tithe extensions were granted only in extraordinary circumstances, and declining resource yields did not qualify as extraordinary. 2. Increase output through other means. Push the workforce harder, extend shifts, reduce safety margins. This would increase casualties, but casualties were acceptable if the tithe was met. 3. Request a tithe reclassification. Argue that Kessler's world should be downgraded to a grade VATE or eyeing designation with correspondingly lower quotas. This was theoretically possible, but required proof that the planet's resources had been exhausted beyond recovery. It also meant admitting failure. Governor Vass chose option 2. He issued orders to the drill site overseers. Shifts were extended from 10 hours to 12. Rest days were reduced from 1 per week to 1 per month. Safety inspections were postponed indefinitely. The workers did not protest. They had no union. They had no representation. They had the ecclesiarchy, which told them that suffering was holy, that labor was prayer, that the emperor saw their sacrifice and valued it. They drilled. Output increased, briefly. For 3 months, the tithe numbers stabilized. Tazven filed his reports and saw the shortfall shrink. He felt a small, quiet pride. The system was working. The problem was being solved. Then the first collapse happened. Drilling Site Phi 7, the same site Tazven had been monitoring, experienced a catastrophic structural failure on 6.692 and M41. A support beam, weakened by months of deferred maintenance and stress from extended operations, buckled during the night shift. The tunnel it supported collapsed into the drilling shaft below. 347 workers died instantly. Another 62 were trapped in adjacent tunnels. Rescue operations were initiated, but the equipment necessary to clear the debris was the same equipment that was supposed to have been replaced months ago. The rescue took 4 days. By the time the last survivor was pulled from the rubble, 59 of the 62 trapped workers were dead. 406 casualties, a standard industrial accident by Imperial standards. Tazven learned about it when the casualty report appeared on his data slate. He read it. He said a prayer for the dead. He noted the impact on output. Drilling Site Phi 7 would be offline for at least 6 months. the tithe shortfall would widen. He filed the report. Governor Vass read the report. He said a prayer for the dead. He authorized a small memorial service at the local chapel. He increased work quotas at the remaining drill sites to compensate. The Mechanicus liaison, Yothis 9, read the report. He noted that the collapse had been caused by structural failure, not equipment malfunction, and therefore did not fall under his jurisdiction. He filed the incident as closed. No one was punished. No one was blamed. The system had worked exactly as designed. Resources had been allocated according to priority. Risks had been assessed and accepted. The workers had known the dangers. They had served faithfully. Their deaths were regrettable but necessary. The Imperium does not weep for its soldiers. It does not mourn its workers. It simply records their names in ledgers and moves on. The tithe shortfall for that quarter was 11.3 million barrels. The quarterly tithe report from Kessler's World was transmitted to the Administratum Sector Office on Helos Prime, a regional hub world 3 systems away. The report arrived via astropathic relay, encoded in the standard format used for resource documentation. It was one of 6,000 such reports received that week. A low-level clerk named Vanix processed the report. He noted the shortfall. He compared it to previous quarters and saw the trend. According to protocol, any world that failed to meet its tithe obligations for 3 consecutive quarters was flagged for review. Kessler's World had now failed for 4 consecutive quarters. Vanix escalated the file. It was assigned to a mid-level adept named Seren, who reviewed the historical data. She saw that Kessler's World had been meeting its tithe consistently for 70 years, with only minor variances. The recent decline was significant but not unprecedented. Worlds experienced downturns. Veins ran dry. Populations declined. Seren made a note. Resource depletion suspected. Recommend tithe reclassification assessment. The file moved up. It reached the desk of a senior administratum official named Lord Scrivener Hask. Hask was responsible for tithe compliance across 40 systems. He reviewed perhaps a dozen such files every week. Most were resolved with minor adjustments. Some required intervention. A few required more permanent solutions. Hask looked at Kessler's World and made a calculation. The planet's strategic value, low. Its promethium reserves were declining. Its infrastructure was aging. Its population was exhausted. Reclassifying the tithe would mean accepting lower output, which would create a shortfall that would need to be made up elsewhere. That meant either increasing tithes on other worlds or finding a new source of promethium. Both options were expensive. Or, Hask thought, the resources currently being spent to maintain Kessler's World, supply shipments, administrative oversight, naval patrols, could be reallocated to more productive worlds. The arithmetic was simple. Kessler's World cost more than it produced. It was no longer profitable to keep it alive. Hask filed a recommendation. Tithe non-compliance. Resource depletion confirmed. Recommends cessation of support pending final assessment. The file moved up. It reached the Segmentum command, where it was reviewed by an official whose name Tasvin Vok would never know, on a world he would never visit, in a room he could not imagine. The official made the same calculation Hask had made. He saw the numbers. He saw the trend. He made the logical choice. He signed the order. Kessler's World was marked for Exterminatus. Not immediately. Not urgently. There were forms to complete, procedures to follow, fleet assets to allocate. But the decision had been made. The planet had been measured, assessed, and found wanting. The Imperium had decided that Kessler's World was no longer worth saving. And Kessler's World continued. For a time, Tasvin Vok did not know that his world had been condemned. No one did. The Exterminatus order was classified at the highest levels of Imperial authority. It was not announced. It was not published. The people of Kessler's World woke up and went to work and prayed and died and were born, and none of them knew that the Imperium had already written them off. This was not cruelty. This was efficiency. If the population knew they were going to die, they might panic. They might riot. They might stop working. The tithe might fail completely, and then the resources currently being extracted would be wasted. Better to let them continue. Better to let them believe that their labor still mattered, that their prayers were still heard, that the Imperium still needed them. Better to let them serve until the very end. The first sign that something was wrong came 6 months later. when a supply shipment failed to arrive. Kessler's world imported food. The planet's surface was too polluted to support agriculture, and the population was too large to sustain on local resources. Every 3 months, a Navy cargo hauler arrived with shipments of corpse starch, reclaimed protein, and vitamin supplements. The shipments were irregular, often delayed, but they always came, until they didn't. Governor Vass filed an inquiry with the sector office. The reply came 8 weeks later: shipment delays due to warp turbulence. Alternative routing under consideration. Vass rationed the remaining food supplies. He extended the intervals between meals. He reduced portion sizes. He told the people to pray for patience that the Emperor would provide. The people prayed. The next supply shipment also failed to arrive. Vass filed another inquiry. This time the reply took 12 weeks. Supply routes under review. Maintain current operations. The food reserves dwindled. Hunger became common. Workers began to collapse at their stations. Output declined further. The tithe shortfall widened. Tasvin Vok filed his reports and watched the numbers spiral. He did not understand what was happening. He knew the system. He knew the procedures. Supply disruptions happened, but they were always resolved. The Imperium did not abandon its worlds. He was wrong. The Imperium had already abandoned Kessler's world. The supply ships had been rerouted. The Administratum had stopped processing requests. The planetary file had been moved from active to pending termination. The people of Kessler's world were no longer citizens of the Imperium. They were ghosts, already dead, still walking. But they did not know it yet. The food riots began on 2.114 M42 in the lower Hive districts where the workers lived. They were not organized. There was no leadership, just hunger and desperation and the slow realization that something was wrong. The Arbites responded with the usual methods: shock mauls, suppression fire, public executions. The rioters were dispersed. Order was restored. The ecclesiarchy preached sermons about patience and faith. The workers returned to the drills. But the hunger remained. Governor Vass sent increasingly urgent requests to the sector office. He explained the situation. He begged for relief. He invoked the Emperor's mercy. He cited regulation, protocol, and precedent. The replies stopped coming. Vass sat in his office and stared at the silent Voxcaster and understood, slowly, terribly, what was happening. The Imperium was not coming to save them. The Imperium had decided they were not worth saving. He did not tell anyone. What could he say? That the God Emperor had abandoned them? That the Imperium, the eternal and undying guardian of humanity, had calculated their worth and found them wanting? He could not say it. He could not even think it. So he continued to govern. He continued to file reports that no one read. He continued to issue orders that no longer mattered. He continued to pray, even though he no longer believed his prayers were heard. This is what faith looks like when it meets reality. Not a crisis, not a collapse, just a slow, quiet erosion. You continue to perform the rituals because the rituals are all you have left. Tasvin Vok also continued to work. He filed his reports. He counted the barrels. He noted the declining numbers and the widening shortfalls and the desperate requests from Governor Vass. He had a family, a wife who worked in the textiles factory, 2 children, ages 9 and 13, who attended the Schola in the mid-hive. He loved them. He provided for them as best he could. He did not tell them that the food shipments had stopped coming. He did not tell them that the planetary stockpiles would be exhausted within 6 months. He gave them his portion of the rations. He told them he had already eaten. He watched them grow thinner. He watched his wife's face become gaunt. He said nothing. What could he say? On 4.883.M42, the power grid failed. Not all at once. It started with brownouts. Sections of the hive losing power for a few hours, then a day, then longer. The Mechanicus liaison, Yothis 9, investigated and found that the reactors were failing. They had been operating beyond recommended capacity for years, and the maintenance that should have been performed had been deferred again and again. Yothis 9 filed a report requesting replacement parts. The report was never answered. The reactors continued to fail. Without power, the drills stopped. Without the drills, the tithe could not be met. Without the tithe, the planet had no purpose. Tasvin Vok sat in his cubicle in the dark, his data slate's battery dying, and filed one last report. He noted the power failure. He noted the cessation of drilling operations. He noted that the tithe could no longer be fulfilled. He uploaded the report to the Vox network and waited for a response. None came. He sat there for a long time, in the dark, listening to the distant sounds of the hive. Somewhere, people were screaming. Somewhere, people were praying. Somewhere, people were dying. And he understood. This was not a mistake. This was not an accident. This was not a failure of the system. This was the system working exactly as designed. The Imperium had decided that Kessler's world was no longer profitable. The resources required to maintain the planet, food, equipment, administrative oversight, exceeded the value of what the planet produced. And so the Imperium had made the rational choice. It had stopped sending supplies. It had stopped answering requests. It had simply withdrawn, quietly, efficiently, allowing the planet to collapse under its own weight. The people of Kessler's world had been expendable all along. They had always been expendable. Every prayer, every drop of sweat, every barrel of promethium, it had all been calculated, measured, assessed. And when the calculation no longer favored their survival, they had been discarded. Not with malice, not with hatred, just with indifference. The Imperium did not hate them, it simply did not care. Tasvin Vok went home that night. He walked through the dark streets of the mid-hive, past the shuttered factories and the silent drill sites. He saw people huddled in doorways. He saw Arbites patrols moving through the streets, maintaining order that no longer mattered. He saw priests preaching to crowds that no longer listened. He climbed the stairs to his apartment. The elevator had stopped working weeks ago. He pushed open the door and found his wife and children sitting in the dark, waiting for him. His wife, Mara, looked up. "Did you bring food?" "No," he said. She nodded. She had expected this. His daughter, Kaisa, asked, "Is the power coming back on?" "I don't know," he said. His son, Pav, said nothing. He just stared at the wall. Tasvin sat down with them. He wanted to tell them something. He wanted to explain. He wanted to make them understand that he had tried, that he had done everything right, that he had served faithfully. But there was nothing to say. The system had worked. The machine had moved on. They had been a component, and now the component was no longer needed. That was all. They sat together in the dark and waited. For a time. The Exterminatus fleet arrived at Kessler's world on 9.771.M42, approximately 1 year after the initial order had been signed. The fleet consisted of 3 vessels, a Navy destroyer, a support frigate, and a transport hauler that had been retrofitted to carry the necessary ordnance. They translated from the warp at the edge of the system and began their approach. The fleet commander, Captain Orell of the destroyer Unyielding Wrath, reviewed the target data. Kessler's world, grade 7th tertiary, population estimated at 400 million remaining, tithe non-compliance, resource depletion, orders, total planetary sterilization via cyclonic torpedo bombardment. Orell had performed Exterminatus operations 6 times in his career. He did not enjoy it, he did not hate it, it was simply a duty. Worlds died, the Imperium endured, that was the way of things. He ordered the fleet to take up bombardment positions. The targeting coordinates were loaded. The cyclonic torpedoes were armed. On the surface of Kessler's world, someone noticed the ships. An astropath, one of the few remaining on the planet, felt the psychic signature of the fleet as it entered orbit. He sent word to the governor's office. Governor Vass ordered the planetary Vox network activated. He broadcast a message to the fleet, requesting identification, requesting orders, requesting anything. The fleet did not respond. Captain Orell did not acknowledge the transmission. There was no point. The people on the surface were already dead. Answering their questions would not change that. He gave the order. The first torpedo launched from the Unyielding Wrath at 1347 Terran Standard Time. It was a cyclonic warhead designed to trigger atmospheric ignition and tectonic destabilization. It would not merely kill the population, it would burn the atmosphere. It would crack the crust. It would render the planet uninhabitable for millennia. The torpedo entered the atmosphere over the northern continent. It detonated at an altitude of 15 kilometers. The flash was visible across half the planet. Tasvin Vok was in his apartment when the light came. He was sitting with his family, rationing the last of their water, when the windows blazed white. The light was so bright that for a moment he thought the power had come back on. He thought the Emperor had answered their prayers. Then he understood. He looked at his wife. She looked back at him. She knew too. They had perhaps 30 seconds before the shockwave reached them. Tazvin pulled his children close. He held them. He said, "I love you." Mara held them too. She said, "The Emperor protects." The shockwave hit. The apartment building disintegrated. The mid-hive collapsed. The entire hive structure, already weakened by months of neglect and decay, came apart like sand. Tazvin Vok died holding his family. He did not feel pain. There was no time for pain. There was only the light, and then there was nothing. Across the planet, 600 million people died in the first 4 hours. The cyclonic bombardment continued throughout the night and into the next day. 50 torpedoes were launched in total. The atmosphere ignited, the oceans boiled, the tectonic plates shifted and cracked. By the end of the second day, Kessler's world was a burning cinder, lifeless and sterile. It had stopped sending supplies. It had stopped answering requests. It had simply withdrawn, quietly, efficiently, allowing the planet to collapse under its own weight. The people of Kessler's world had been expendable all along. They had always been expendable. Every prayer, every drop of sweat, every barrel of promethium, it had all been calculated, measured, assessed, and when the calculation no longer favored their survival, they had been discarded. Not with malice, not with hatred, just with indifference. The Imperium did not hate them, it simply did not care. Tazvin Vok went home that night. He walked through the dark streets of the mid-hive, past the shuttered factories and the silent drill sites. He saw people huddled in doorways. He saw Arbites patrols moving through the streets, maintaining order that no longer mattered. He saw priests preaching to crowds that no longer listened. He climbed the stairs to his apartment. The elevator had stopped working weeks ago. He pushed open the door and found his wife and children sitting in the dark, waiting for him. His wife, Mara, looked up. "Did you bring food?" "No," he said. She nodded. She had expected this. His daughter, Kaisa, asked, "Is the power coming back on?" "I don't know," he said. His son, Pav, said nothing. He just stared at the wall. Tazvin sat down with them. He wanted to tell them something. He wanted to explain. He wanted to make them understand that he had tried, that he had done everything right, that he had served faithfully. But there was nothing to say. The system had worked. The machine had moved on. They had been a component, and now the component was no longer needed. That was all. They sat together in the dark and waited. For a time, the Exterminatus fleet arrived at Kessler's world on 9.771.M42, approximately 1 year after the initial order had been signed. The fleet consisted of 3 vessels, a Navy destroyer, a support frigate, and a transport hauler that had been retrofitted to carry the necessary ordnance. They translated from the warp at the edge of the system and began their approach. The fleet commander, Captain Orell of the destroyer Unyielding Wrath, reviewed the target data. Kessler's world, grade 7th, tertiary, population estimated at 400 million remaining, tithe non-compliance, resource depletion, orders, total planetary sterilization via cyclonic torpedo bombardment. Orell had performed Exterminatus operations 6 times in his career. He did not enjoy it. He did not hate it. It was simply a duty. Worlds died. The Imperium endured. That was the way of things. He ordered the fleet to take up bombardment positions. The targeting coordinates were loaded. The cyclonic torpedoes were armed. On the surface of Kessler's world, someone noticed the ships. An astropath, one of the few remaining on the planet, felt the psychic signature of the fleet as it entered orbit. He sent word to the governor's office. Governor Vass ordered the planetary Vox network activated. He broadcast a message to the fleet, requesting identification, requesting orders, requesting anything. The fleet did not respond. Captain Orell did not acknowledge the transmission. There was no point. The people on the surface were already dead. Answering their questions would not change that. He gave the order. The first torpedo launched from the Unyielding Wrath at 1347 Terran Standard Time. It was a cyclonic warhead designed to trigger atmospheric ignition and tectonic destabilization. It would not merely kill the population. It would burn the atmosphere. It would crack the crust. It would render the planet uninhabitable. The torpedo entered the atmosphere over the northern continent. It detonated at an altitude of 15 kilometers. The flash was visible across half the planet. Tazvin Vok was in his apartment when the light came. He was sitting with his family, rationing the last of their water when the windows blazed white. The light was so bright that for a moment he thought the power had come back on. He thought the Emperor had answered their prayers. Then he understood. He looked at his wife. She looked back at him. She knew too. They had perhaps 30 seconds before the shockwave reached them. Tasvin pulled his children close. He held them. He said, "I love you." Mara held them too. She said, "The Emperor protects." The shockwave hit. The apartment building disintegrated. The mid-hive collapsed. The entire hive structure, already weakened by months of neglect and decay, came apart like sand. Tasvin Vok died holding his family. He did not feel pain. There was no time for pain. There was only the light, and then there was nothing. Across the planet, 600 million people died in the first 4 hours. The cyclonic bombardment continued throughout the night and into the next day. 50 torpedoes were launched in total. The atmosphere ignited. The oceans boiled. The tectonic plates shifted and cracked. By the end of the second day, Kessler's world was a burning cinder, lifeless and sterile. Captain Orell watched from orbit and noted the completion of the operation. He filed the mission report. He recorded the ordnance expenditure. He noted the time and date. Then he ordered the fleet to break orbit and proceed to the next system on their patrol route. The mission had taken 43 hours from arrival to departure. It was considered efficient. In the archives of the Administratum, on a world Tasvin Vok never knew existed, a clerk received the mission completion report from the unyielding Wrath. The clerk processed the report. He updated the planetary database. Kessler's world, status changed from pending termination to terminated. Population, 0. Tithe status, NA. File archived. The clerk moved on to the next report. In the same archive, buried under 10,000 years of accumulated data, was Tasvin Vok's final report. The one he had filed in the dark, noting the power failure and the cessation of operations. No one had ever read it. No one ever would. But it existed. In the great machine of the Imperium, every piece of data mattered. Every filed report, every recorded number, every name in every ledger. They were all preserved, even if no one remembered them. Tasvin Vok had believed that his work mattered. He had believed that every data entry, every form, every count was a prayer. He had been right, in a way. His work had mattered. It had been recorded. It had been processed. It had been used. It had been used to calculate his death. The Imperium does not lie to its people. It does not promise them safety or happiness or long life. It promises them only one thing: that their service will be remembered, that their sacrifice will be recorded, that in the great ledger of humanity, their names will not be forgotten. And the Imperium keeps that promise. The names are recorded, the sacrifices are tallied, the data is preserved, and then the Imperium moves on. There is a question that no one on Kessler's world thought to ask, because asking it would have been heresy. The question is this: why? Why did the Imperium abandon them? Why did it stop sending supplies? Why did it choose to destroy the planet rather than reclassify the tithe or send aid? The answer is simple, and it is the same answer that explains everything about the Imperium. Because the Imperium cannot afford mercy. The Imperium governs 1,000,000 worlds. On each of those worlds, billions of people labor and suffer and die. The resources required to sustain those populations, food, water, equipment, medicine, are finite. They must be allocated. Priorities must be set. And when a world stops producing, when it becomes a drain on resources rather than a source, the Imperium must make a choice. It can continue to support the world, diverting resources from other, more productive planets. It can accept lower tithes, creating shortfalls that must be made up elsewhere. It can spend time and effort and money trying to restore the world to productivity, or it can cut its losses. The Imperium chose to cut its losses. It always does. Because the Imperium is not a government. It is not a protector. It is a machine, and machines do not waste resources on broken components. The people of Kessler's world were not murdered. They were simply no longer useful. And in the Imperium, usefulness is the only measure of worth. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system. The Imperium survives because it is willing to burn its own people to keep the machine running. It survives because it does not sentimentalize. It does not mourn. It does not hesitate. It calculates. It allocates. It moves on. And this is why the Imperium will endure. Not because it is good, not because it is just, but because it is willing to do what is necessary, no matter how many worlds it must burn. In the years following the Exterminatus of Kessler's world, the Administratum reallocated the Prometheum tithe to 3 nearby systems. Their quotas were increased by 20 million barrels per year each. The shortfall was made up within 18 months. No one on those worlds knew why their quotas had increased. They were not told about Kessler's world. They were not told that 600 million people had died to make their increased burden possible. They simply drilled more, they worked longer, they prayed harder, and they met their tithes. The segmentum moved on, the sector moved on, the Imperium moved on. On Terra, in the halls of the Administratum, a senior official reviewed the quarterly tithe reports and noted that Prometheum production in Segmentum Obscurus had stabilized. He filed the report as satisfactory. He did not think about Kessler's world. He did not know its name. He had never heard of Tasvin Vok or Governor Vass or any of the 600 million people who had died there. He simply moved on to the next report. The machine continued to function. If Tasvin Vok could speak now, if the ashes of his world could form words, what would he say? Would he curse the Imperium? Would he rage against the injustice of his death? No, because Tasvin Vok was a faithful man. And faith, true faith, does not waver even in the face of annihilation. He would say that he had served faithfully. He would say that he had done his duty. He would say that if the God Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, had decided that Kessler's world must die, then it must have been necessary. It must have been just. He would say that he did not understand, but that understanding was not required of him. Only obedience, only service, only faith. He would say a prayer. God Emperor, whose light guides the Imperium eternal, whose will is law, whose judgment is absolute, I ask nothing, I regret nothing, I served as you required. If my service is complete, if my world is ended, then let it be so. Let my death be counted among the billions who have died in your name. Let my sacrifice be recorded in the great ledger of humanity. Let it mean something, even if I cannot see what it means. Even if no one remembers, let it mean something. And the Emperor, 10,000 years dead, enthroned in gold and silence, would not answer. Because the Emperor does not answer. He never has. He simply endures, and the Imperium endures with him, burning its own people to keep the light from going out. This is what it means to live in the Imperium. This is what it means to serve. This is what it means to die on a world marked for Exterminatus. You do not die as a hero. You do not die as a martyr. You die as a number in a ledger, a line in a report, a calculation that no longer balances. You die believing that your death mattered, and perhaps in the vast and terrible arithmetic of the Imperium, it did. There is a planet in Segmentum Obscurus that no longer has a name. It is listed in the Administratum archives as KES 7745-Gamma. It is marked as sterile, non-compliant, archived. No ships visit it. No maps include it. No one remembers what it was called, or who lived there, or what they produced. It is just another dead rock in a galaxy full of dead rocks. And in the deep archives of Terra, buried under mountains of data that no one will ever read, there is a file. In that file is a report, filed by a man named Tasvin Vok, on a date that no longer matters. The report says, tithe shortfall continues, power grid failure, operations ceased, requesting guidance. No guidance was ever given. The request went unanswered because there was no one left to answer it. The officials who might have responded had already moved on. The systems that might have processed it had already reassigned their resources. The world that had sent it had already been condemned. Tasvin Vok had filed his report into the void, and the void had filed back. This is the final truth about living on a world marked for Exterminatus. You never know. You cannot know. The system is designed so that you continue to serve, continue to believe, continue to hope, right up until the moment the light fills the sky. Because if you knew, you might stop. You might rebel. You might refuse to drill one more barrel, file one more report, say one more prayer. And the Imperium cannot allow that. It cannot allow its components to choose when they stop functioning. It cannot allow its people to decide that their service is complete. Only the Imperium can make that decision. Only the Imperium can decide when you have given enough. After Kessler's world burned, nothing changed. The Administratum did not revise its protocols. The Mechanicus did not improve its maintenance schedules. The Navy did not question its orders. The ecclesiarchy did not doubt its teachings. Because there was nothing to learn, the system had worked exactly as intended. A world had stopped producing. Resources had been withdrawn. Population had been eliminated. The tithe shortfall had been resolved through reallocation. The machine had adjusted and continued functioning. This is not a tragedy, not by imperial standards. This is simply mathematics. The Imperium does not learn from its mistakes because it does not make mistakes. Every world that burns was meant to burn. Every population that dies was meant to die. Not because they were evil or heretical or corrupt, but because the calculation determined that their continued existence was no longer profitable. Some worlds burn because of chaos. Some burn because of xenos invasion. Some burn because of rebellion or mutation or any of 1,000 threats that lurk in the darkness between the stars. But most worlds, the vast majority, burn because of arithmetic. The system is designed so that you continue to serve, continue to believe, continue to hope, right up until the moment the light fills the sky. Because if you knew, you might stop. You might rebel. You might refuse to drill one more barrel, file one more report, say one more prayer. And the Imperium cannot allow that. It cannot allow its components to choose when they stop functioning. It cannot allow its people to decide that their service is complete. Only the Imperium can make that decision. Only the Imperium can decide when you have given enough. After Kessler's world burned, nothing changed. The Administratum did not revise its protocols. The Mechanicus did not improve its maintenance schedules. The Navy did not question its orders. The ecclesiarchy did not doubt its teachings. Because there was nothing to learn, the system had worked exactly as intended. A world had stopped producing. Resources had been withdrawn. Population had been eliminated. The tithe shortfall had been resolved through reallocation. The machine had adjusted and continued functioning. This is not a tragedy, not by imperial standards. This is simply mathematics. The Imperium does not learn from its mistakes because it does not make mistakes. Every world that burns was meant to burn. Every population that dies was meant to die. Not because they were evil or heretical or corrupt, but because the calculation determined that their continued existence was no longer profitable. Some worlds burn because of chaos. Some burn because of xenos invasion. Some burn because of rebellion or mutation or any of 1,000 threats that lurk in the darkness between the stars. But most worlds, the vast majority, burn because of arithmetic. They burn because the cost of keeping them alive exceeded the value of what they produced. They burn because somewhere in a room no one will ever see, someone added up the numbers and made a rational choice. And the people who died never knew why. They died believing they had failed. They died believing that if they had only worked harder, prayed more fervently, served more faithfully, they might have been saved. They were wrong. There was nothing they could have done. The decision had been made before they even knew there was a problem. The forms had been filed. The seals had been affixed, the fleet had been dispatched, their world had been measured and found wanting, and no amount of faith or labor or sacrifice could change that. This is the machine. This is how it works. This is how it has always worked. And this is why it will continue to work, long after every individual world has been forgotten. The inheritors, who drills now? The 3 worlds that inherited Kessler's Prometheum tithe never knew what they had inherited. On drilling world Cassius 9, a young overseer named Kellen received notification that his sector's quota had increased. He filed the paperwork, he extended the shifts, he reduced the safety margins. He did exactly what Tasvin Vok had done, a decade earlier, on a world that no longer existed. Kellen was a faithful man. He believed in the God Emperor. He believed that his work mattered. He believed that if he served diligently, if he met his quotas, if he followed the regulations, the Imperium would protect him. He was wrong, but he did not know he was wrong yet. He would not know until the supply ships stopped arriving, until the requests went unanswered, until the food ran out and the power failed and the fleet appeared in the sky. And by then, it would be too late. The machine does not warn you. It simply uses you until you break, and then it finds someone else. On Cassius 9, Kellen filed his reports and counted his barrels and went home to his family. He kissed his wife, he held his children, He said his prayers. He did not know that his world was already being evaluated, that somewhere in the administratum, officials were reviewing production data and calculating resource allocation and making projections about future profitability. He did not know that his world, too, might one day fail to meet its tithe, that the same quiet withdrawal would begin, that the same careful arithmetic would condemn him and everyone he loved. He simply did his job and believed it mattered, just as Tasven Vok had believed, just as millions of others believed on thousands of worlds across the entire Imperium. They believed because they had to, because faith was all they had, because without faith in the system, there was only the terrible truth that they were expendable, that their lives meant nothing, that the Imperium they served would discard them the moment it became convenient. And so they chose faith. They chose to believe the prayers. They chose to trust the machine. And the machine ground on, fueled by their faith, burning through worlds and populations and entire systems, leaving nothing behind but archived files and sterile rocks and the silent testimony of the dead. There is something worse than dying on a world marked for Exterminatus. It is knowing that your death was not necessary. Kessler's world could have been saved. The drilling equipment could have been replaced. The maintenance could have been performed. The supply shipments could have continued. The tithe could have been reclassified. All of these options were possible. None of them were complicated. None of them would have bankrupted the Imperium or weakened its defenses or compromised its security. They simply would have cost resources, time, attention, money. And the Imperium decided those resources were better spent elsewhere. This is the horror. Not that the Imperium is evil, but that it is indifferent. Not that it hates you, but that it does not think about you at all. Not that it wants you to die, but that your death is simply the most efficient solution to a logistical problem. You are not killed by monsters. You are not killed by enemies. You are killed by a spreadsheet. Your life is measured in barrels of promethium and tons of ore and cubic meters of food shipments. And when the numbers stop adding up, when the cost exceeds the benefit, you are deleted. Not with ceremony, not with regret, just with a signature on a form and a note in a file. Tithe non-compliance. Resource depletion confirmed. Recommend cessation of support. 18 words. That is all it takes to condemn a world. And the person who writes those words will go home that night and eat dinner and sleep soundly because they have done their job. They have served the Imperium faithfully. They have made the rational choice. They will never see the faces of the people they killed. They will never know their names. They will never stand on the surface of the world they condemned and watch it burn. They will simply move on to the next file. And this is the true horror of the Imperium. Not the cruelty, but the banality. Not the malice, but the indifference. Not the monsters, but the clerks. Tasven Vok's children died in his arms when the shockwave hit. Kaisa was 9 years old. She had wanted to be a scribe, like her father. She had practiced her numbers every night, copying them carefully into a small notebook her father had given her. She had believed that if she worked hard enough, if she learned well enough, she could serve the Emperor just as her father did. She died not understanding what the light in the sky meant. She died holding her father's hand. Pav was 13. He had already been assigned to the drilling apprentice program. In 2 years, he would have gone to work in the promethium fields. He would have followed in the footsteps of billions of Imperial citizens, laboring in the dark, serving faithfully, believing it mattered. He died before he ever set foot in a drill site. Their mother, Mara, had worked in the textile factory for 16 years. She had woven cloth for Imperial uniforms. She had never seen a soldier wear the clothes she made. She had never been thanked for her work. She had simply done it day after day because it was her duty. She died believing the Emperor would protect them. She died with a prayer on her lips. In the Imperium, there are no memorials for people like Tasven Vok and his family. There are no monuments. There are no songs. There are only files in an archive that no one reads. But somewhere in the vast and incomprehensible data vaults of Terra, their names are recorded. Tasven Vok, Mara Vok, Kaisa Vok, Pav Vok, citizens of the Imperium, deceased. The date of death is listed as 9.771 M42. The cause of death is listed as Exterminatus compliance action. The file is marked as archived and sealed. No one will ever open it. No one will ever read their names. No one will ever know that they existed. But the data is preserved. Because in the Imperium, everything is recorded. Every name, every death, every world. Nothing is forgotten, even if no one remembers. This is the promise the Imperium makes to its people. Not that they will be saved, not that they will be protected, not that their lives will have meaning, just that they will be counted. And in the end, that is all Tasvin Vok ever wanted. To be counted, to be recorded, to be part of something larger than himself. He got his wish, he was counted, and then he was forgotten. You might ask, why do they not rebel? Why do the people of the Imperium continue to serve, continue to believe, continue to pray when they must know on some level that the system does not care about them? The answer is simple, because they have no choice. Not because they are forced, though they are. Not because they are brainwashed, though they are. But because the alternative is unthinkable. To reject the Imperium is to reject the only thing standing between humanity and annihilation. The galaxy is full of horrors, chaos, xenos, demons, heretics. Without the Imperium, humanity would be extinguished in a generation. And so the people serve, not because they love the Imperium, but because they fear what would happen without it. They drill the Prometheum because if they do not, the ships will not fly. They weave the uniforms because if they do not, the soldiers will freeze. They file the reports because if they do not, the machine will grind to a halt. They serve because they must, because the alternative is the end of everything. And the Imperium knows this. The Imperium has always known this. This is why it does not need to be kind. This is why it does not need to be just. This is why it can burn 1,000,000 worlds, and the survivors will simply pray harder. Because the survivors know that without the Imperium, there would be no survivors. This is the genius of the system. It is not held together by love or loyalty or justice. It is held together by fear and faith and the cold arithmetic of survival. And so the people pray. They pray to the God Emperor, 10,000 years dead, silent and still on his golden throne. They pray because prayer is all they have. They pray because faith is the only thing that makes their suffering bearable. They pray, and they believe, and they serve. And the Imperium endures. Here is the question that haunts every story about the Imperium. What would you do if you were Tasvin Vok? If you knew, truly knew, that your world had been condemned, that the supply ships would not return, that the Imperium had decided you were expendable, what would you do? Would you rebel? Would you try to overthrow the planetary government, seize the Vox stations, broadcast the truth to the people? And if you did, what would happen? The people would panic, they would riot, they would tear the Hive apart in their desperation, and they would still die, just faster and more violently. Would you flee? Would you try to commandeer a ship, escape to another system, save yourself and your family? And where would you go? Every world in the Imperium is the same. Every world is measured and assessed and evaluated. If Kessler's world could be condemned, any world could be condemned. There is no safety. There is no escape. Would you fight? Would you resist the Exterminatus fleet when it arrived? Fire back with whatever weapons you could find? And what would that accomplish? The fleet is designed to destroy planets. Your resistance would be noted, filed as non-compliance, and then you would die anyway. Would you accept it? Would you gather your family, say your prayers, and wait for the end? This is what Tasvin Vok did. Not because he was weak, not because he was broken, but because he understood that there was no alternative. The machine was too large, the system was too vast. One man, one family, one world, they meant nothing against the weight of the Imperium. And so he held his children and said, "I love you." And he waited for the light. Because that is all any of us can do, in the face of systems too large to fight, too powerful to resist, too indifferent to appeal to. We hold the people we love, we say what needs to be said, we wait. After Kessler's world burned, the Imperium moved on. Ships continued to sail the warp, soldiers continued to fight the Emperor's wars, scribes continued to file reports, the machine continued to function. Somewhere in a system you will never visit, on a world you will never know, another Tasvin Vok sits at a desk and counts barrels. Another family waits in the dark for food shipments that will not arrive. Another governor files reports that will not be answered. And somewhere in a room you cannot imagine, someone is reviewing those reports and making a calculation. The Imperium does not sleep. It does not rest. It does not mourn. It simply calculates, allocates, and moves on. World by world, system by system, generation by generation, burning its way across the galaxy, fueled by faith and fear and the bodies of those who believed they were serving something greater than themselves. And perhaps they were. Perhaps every world that burns is a necessary sacrifice. Perhaps every death serves the greater good. Perhaps the Emperor, silent on his throne, sees the suffering of his people and knows it is required. Or perhaps not. Perhaps it is just arithmetic. Just resources and costs and projections. Just a machine that has been running for 10,000 years, grinding through populations and planets, sustained not by divine will but by its own momentum. Perhaps there is no plan, no grand design, no higher purpose. Perhaps there is only the machine and the people it burns and the silence that comes after. If you ever find yourself on a world marked for Exterminatus, and you will not know if you are, this is what you should remember. The Imperium does not owe you an explanation. It does not owe you a warning. It does not owe you mercy. It owes you nothing. You owe it everything. This is the covenant. This is the bargain that was made 10,000 years ago when the Emperor walked among men. You give your life, your labor, your faith, and in return, the Imperium promises you nothing except that your death will be recorded. Your name will be entered in a ledger, your service will be noted, your sacrifice will be counted, and then you will be forgotten. This is not cruelty. This is not injustice. This is simply the price of survival in a galaxy that wants you dead. So pray. Pray to the God Emperor. Pray that your world's tithe is met. Pray that the supply ships arrive. Pray that the calculations favor your continued existence. And if they do not, if the ships stop coming, if the power fails, if the light fills the sky, then pray that your death is quick. Because the Imperium does not kill people quickly. Not usually. It starves them slowly. It watches them collapse. It allows them to understand in those final moments exactly how little they mattered. This is what it means to live in the Imperium of Man. This is what it means to serve the God Emperor. This is what it means to be human in the 41st millennium. You are a number in a ledger, a component in a machine, a resource to be expended. And when you are used up, when you have given everything you have to give, the machine will discard you and move on. Without malice, without regret, without a second thought. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And war requires fuel, and you are the fuel. That is all you have ever been. That is all you will ever be. Record ends, file archived, no further action required. I do not know if anyone will read this. I do not know if there is anyone left to read it. The ships are in orbit. I saw them on the auger displays before the power failed completely. 3 vessels, Navy configuration. They have not responded to any of our transmissions. I know what they are here to do. I have failed. I have failed my world. I have failed my people. I have failed the Emperor. No, that is not true. I did not fail. I did everything I was supposed to do. I followed every regulation. I filed every report. I made every sacrifice that was asked of me. The system failed. Or perhaps the system worked exactly as it was meant to, and I simply did not understand what I was part of. I keep thinking about the numbers, the barrels we extracted, the people who died in the drill sites, the children who starved when the food shipments stopped. I tried to save them. I tried to make it work, but the numbers never added up. They were never meant to add up. We were always going to die. From the moment the first drill bit into the rock, from the moment the first barrel was filled, we were on borrowed time. The Imperium was simply waiting to see how much it could extract before we broke. And now we have broken. And now we die. I am writing this because I need to believe that someone, somewhere, will know what happened here. That we were not just numbers. That we were people. That we served faithfully. That we deserved better. But I know the truth. No one will read this. And if they do, they will not care. We were one world among millions. Our death changes nothing. The light is starting. I can see it through the window. The sky is burning. I want to curse. I want to rage. I want to scream at the Imperium, at the Emperor, at whatever God is listening. But I cannot. Even now, even at the end, I cannot let go of my faith. Because if I do, if I admit that this was all meaningless, then what was the point? What was any of it for? So I will say a prayer instead. God Emperor, if you are listening, if you have ever listened, please let our deaths mean something. Please let this sacrifice serve some purpose. Please let the Imperium endure. Please let entry ends, final characters corrupted by thermal distortion. No further data recoverable.